One of the most notorious months in the investing calendar has arrived with a bang. You've likely heard the expression, sell in May and go away. And after all that's happened this week, you may be tempted to act on it. But I can almost guarantee you've never heard of the earth-shattering Wall Street event headed straight for US stocks in less than 60 days. Now, the date is all set. It's coming. 63 funds are actively preparing to send shockwaves through over $10 trillion of American wealth. And you have mere weeks to get ready before a wave of volatility crashes over half of the US stock market. My good friend and brilliant forensic accountant Joel Littman is stepping forward to help you protect yourself and get ready on Wednesday, May 10th. If you have any money in IRAs, 401ks, annuities, pension plans, stocks, or bonds, I urge you to give Joel's warning your most serious consideration. It couldn't be more important to protect your wealth in the weeks ahead. Again, Joel will go live on Wednesday, May 10th with all the critical details. Head to 2023warning.com now to make sure you're on his list for updates. Again, that's 2023warning.com. Don't miss it. All right, we're back with E.B. Tucker. Our conversation continues. This is going to be a part 2 that will help you better your life overall, right, E.B.? I know you're a big proponent of that. But you definitely piqued my curiosity when you were telling me the Fed may actually be doing great harm to our mental health. How?
Well, the premise, which people need to understand the backstory, is that I'm writing a series of essays that subscribers, even subscribers on my site, ebtucker.com, they'll read these essays as they're written, and then there'll be a book, and then anybody can buy the book. And these essays are about life and philosophy and my experiences. And the goal of the book is that if something were to happen to me, my kids could pick the book up and they would understand their dad's life and what he thought about when he was working. And I do think the Fed has ruined our mental health. And the starter of this conversation was because the spaces that we live in are very sterile and I think very harmful to us. They're cavernous boxes filled with junk that we don't need. They're very cheap. They're a box with a couple windows and columns, and a lot of people are very depressed when they live in these structures, and then they seek help from a therapist that prescribes psychotropic, mind-altering medications to them, which begins changing how the brain works, and everybody thinks this is a great idea, and then they're afraid to say it's not working, and I'm even more upset than when I started this whole thing. But people did not used to live in these types of houses. They actually used to live in modest-sized homes that were built with quality construction materials. That doesn't mean luxury. It means quality. And that was a post-war era. What we did was we had laborers, we had terrazzo and concrete and stucco and rebar and different materials that we were able to utilize to build lots of housing for people. Now, that's all finished, because I'm an enthusiast for architecture, and so I'm always building things and tinkering with a home. And you cannot find a builder to build you a small house, because I've told you before, and I'm writing this in an essay, I don't think people should live in more than 500 square feet. Family of 4, 2,000 feet. If you can't live in that, then it's
Why do you think that? Because I'm looking at my apartment thinking, no way, I want the space. I want the backyard. I need more closet space.
Well, a backyard is not living. It's outdoor space, so it's kind of a different
living space.
thing.
Living space.
So
convince me.
I have a strong belief that, and I'm breaking this down in the essay, that the size of the bedroom. I'm giving people specifics like what each room should be sized if it's designed properly. And when I say designed properly, I mean the spaces integrate with one another, so that when you're walking from space to space and you're interacting with your surroundings, it changes your mood. And people need to understand, I have rented a Frank Lloyd Wright house and spent the night in it. I have toured architectural homes and buildings all over the world with architects, because I'm fascinated by how my mood changes based on my space. And I found that if I'm in a space that's poorly designed with, hospital lights on the ceiling and poor colors, and it's a square box, I can't create, I can't work, and I'm in a foul mood. And let's get back to the Fed. People say, what does this have to do with the Fed? Okay, you cannot find a builder to build you a house that is like what I'm writing about, because the builder says to you, I can't make money building that house because I'm going to sell you this house at $500 a foot. But when I build you a bonus room, that costs about $90 a foot because there's nothing in it. And what are you going to put in that room? Stuff that you're never going to use, junk. And so the builder tells you what kind of house you're going to get. You don't tell the builder what kind of house you want. They tell you what kind of house you're going to get. And the builder has succeeded in doing this for probably 40 years now because people have had access to cheaper and cheaper money. And the bank says, well, we'll loan you this much on this size, and the bigger the better because real estate always goes up. And so the more square footage you have, the more money you make. But it doesn't matter how much money you make because what you realize is that what are you going to do with the money? You're miserable. You're much better off being in a space that works with your mood and enhances your life. I'm telling you that my space, when I interact with my children in my space, is wonderful. I mean, we're living a life in a space. And people are stunned that E.B. Tucker lives in a house that's 1,650 feet total. People are stunned.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Because you could still have the beauty and your, feeling of euphoria moving from room to room, but just in a bigger house. So what is it about the small house that you like? Is it your proximity to your children that you're not yelling across the house, like dinner's ready?
I live in a separate structure. My structure where I exist is detached from the home, and then it's connected by a well thought out use of the space. So actually, it's not because I'm piled on top of the kids. They are in a main structure, and then I'm off in another structure that's separated by a gorgeous deck and a pool and all these things. But the point is that the space is not well used typically. When a builder designs the space, it's built based on the way a builder thinks. Whereas when an architect designs the space, every single line and detail and passageway that's built is designed to flow in a way that suits your life. I know this is a lot for people, so I'm writing this in essay form with examples of things that I've done because it is something you can understand. And when you start thinking about the places you've lived and you start thinking about how you felt in those places, living in a gigantic box with no trees and it's just like a builder special is very miserable.
It's actually, that's true. If I think about all the places I've lived, probably one of my favorites was my very small apartment in Rome, but was extremely well thought out. I mean, it was like a one bedroom, one bathroom, tiny bathroom, but it was probably one of the happiest periods of my life. And
the materials used and the craftsmanship and the style and the way it flowed and the way you used it, the way you interacted with it. And so what I'm going to do is in the next few we're going to build a concept home that's called the AntiDevelopment Home. And it's going to we're going to submit it to architectural magazines. I've already picked out the architect and his wife. We had dinner the other night to discuss this. And it's going to be the antithesis of everything that every building subdivision builder does. And everyone's going to hate it. But when it's done, I can promise you that it'll become famous because people will say, I don't know what it is about that place, but it changes how I feel. I toured it. I can't believe it. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'll try to replicate it. But they can't replicate it because people don't understand. What's happened is the big square box with a gigantic jumbo mortgage filled with LED lights and columns and things you don't need and bonus rooms has affected our mental health. Now, when you travel to other areas, like for instance, places in Portugal, Spain, a lot of places in older Western Europe, some places in Brazil, certain parts of Latin America, you don't find the same situation. There are no craftsmen in the United States. You cannot find. I built a deck of Ipe. It was impossible to find someone to install this wood because the only thing they know how to install is like that fake Coke bottle wood that you smack it down with an air gun and you get out of there in one day and the deck falls apart 2 years later. But if you try to use teak or certain types of concrete or terrazzo or beautiful materials, there's nobody to install it because the only people that are employed are people that do highly mechanized, homogeneous Home Depot materials for your house. And I'm telling you that if you go into something like you're talking about with Rome, something, a space, a special space, you immediately, your mood changes. It's not about luxury, by the way. It's not about luxury. It is not expensive to design something that enhances your life. People all the time, they forget about that.
You know what? You're absolutely, absolutely right. And I'll just share this other story. You've been over at my house in New York, Evie, and you know that the toys, my children's toys, have overtaken the house. It is their house, not our house anymore. So my sister-in-law's visiting, and she's, you know, an organizer freak, and she's like you. She's like, you don't need all this stuff. So she literally kicked me out of the house yesterday because I couldn't bear with it. Because she's like going through my closet. She's like, you don't need this, all these toys. And I'm like, but those are their baby toys from when they were 3 months. She's like, you don't need it. Bags. But she kicked me out because it was just too much for me emotionally.
Yeah.
So then she's like, leave and come back in like 6 hours. So that's exactly what I did. Come back. It was a whole other space, but it already changed. Getting rid of all this stuff we don't need completely transformed the space. You have to come back, and you'd be wowed. And you're right. We don't need 99% of it. So
you don't need it. And then what happens is when you simplify your life, then you're willing to pick things out based on things that you'd like to interact with. So you start designing the things you want in your space, you know, and you teach this to your kids, right? Like, I don't have a television. I mean, I don't have a television even on the wall that doesn't work. There is no television. There is no iPad. There is no digital kid, anything. And people are like, what do you do? Well, we have art. We have a saltwater pool. We have things that we can build. We talk to each other. I tell them stories. They tell me about things. And then when someone comes over, they say, I never had a kid tell me this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you know why? Because he's not watching, eating chicken tenders and watching an iPad
Bubble guppies,
when I take him out to dinner. Okay? I mean, we go out to dinner. You know, I take him to the US Open every year. We do all these things. We interact. We live this life. And everybody says, oh, yeah, well, that's because you're rich. I'm telling you, if you add up the amount of money that you waste on junk and poorly produced entertainment content and cheap food and wasted space and all these things, you have plenty of money to live a rich life, like a meaningful life. And that's the thing about the newsletter is I'm trying to explain to people, you can manage your money, you can build your empire, and you can live a purposeful life. You can do it. What's happened is that you've never even spent 5 minutes thinking about it from that perspective. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I do all three of those things. And you're going to be on a journey with me. And so over time, you're going to be walking with me from this desk through life as it happens. I'm going to tell you the things that I'm up to and how I approach all these things. And it's not about some like monetary outcome. It's like that you can make money your whole life. You're always going to have something to do to make money. You don't see a lot of starving people in the United States. I mean, even the homeless people have a stack of food they don't want that's been given to them. You're not going to starve. And so therefore you should spend your time doing things that you enjoy, that you're engaged with people that you enjoy. And that's how if you live that life, it's like your whole perspective changes and you're not as confused and you're not confused. The whole conversation started with your space. You're not confused anymore because you're not thinking about what does Zillow tell me my house is worth. You don't care what it's worth. You tell people tell me all the time that I made a mistake with something. I go, you're completely right. However, I enjoy this so much that I don't mind that I've made an error in judgment according to you. I like this thing or place or whatever so much that it's so enjoyable to me that, I have to do it.
I am thoroughly enjoying this conversation, and I can't wait to read the essays, but I do want to transition, since we're on the topic of the Fed in general, because I know you have some interesting thoughts. We've talked about it multiple times, central bank digital currencies. How can we not now, since it's been a few months since I spoke with you and you've seen all the advancements that we're making in regards to central bank digital currencies. I want to get your latest thoughts on CBDCs, and always going back to the main point you make, that the Fed's main mandate, forget inflation, forget everything else, is to keep the US dollar as the #1 currency in the world? How are they going to win that fight now?
It needs to have power. I mean, it's not that other currencies can't become relevant. It's that if the US dollar is a police baton and it loses its ability to hit people at the knees and knock them down, then it's a huge problem for the United States, because, as one of my friends says, it costs 17 cents to print a $100 bill, but people have to dig, a barrel and a half of oil out of the ground and send it to us to get that 17-cent $100 bill. And the US dollar is still the most used physical currency in the world. If you travel to a bizarre place, they want the blue $100 bill. This is what they want. And it's difficult for the U.S. to conduct its foreign policy if they can't enslave countries by loaning them money and then dictating the terms. And I'm not advocating any of these things. What I'm telling you is that this is what it is. This is how the system works. And if that system stops working, life for us is affected. Okay. And I'm just reporting the facts, saying the people in charge need to protect that, or else they lose standing. So that's what's happening right now. And we need to watch that, and we need to stop being so upset about what is or is not happening or what should be happening, because we work in the system. So we like it or not, you're always going to be in a system. It doesn't matter where you go. You're always going to be in a system. So I have friends that are in tax havens, and they're still in a system, and they have to be aware of what's going on in that system, or else they're going to end up in a scenario where they're in trouble, and they take a huge loss, right? So you can move to Europe, you can move to South America, you can move to Puerto Rico, you can move to an island nation like St. Kitts. It doesn't matter. There's always a system. There's always issues with that system. And so for us in the United States or in North America, we need to be aware of what these people are doing. If the Fed doesn't raise...
Even in El Salvador.
You have issues. Yeah, El Salvador, okay. If you notice, El Salvador was the loudest chicken in the coop during the Bitcoin mania. Remember, they were... Oh, that all stopped.
Of course.
Okay, it's all done. They were smacked by the U.S., and they said, you knock this off, do whatever you want down there, but get off the television talking about Bitcoin, all these things. You don't hear a word about that anymore. And so let's get back to your original question. I said in my book, which I think people need to look at when the book was printed, when I did this. First, 2016 was when we came up with FedCoin. 2020 is when I wrote the book predicting this. Now it seems like a reality because we got distracted by speculative crypto mania. We were buying Pancake Coin, for $1 and then selling it for $10. Some people held it, all the way up, all the way down. But we were buying thousands of these small coins, and we didn't know what they did. We just thought we were going to make money, and we got a tip from our friend. We were speculating, and we were distracted by what's really going on here. So all the things that make Bitcoin special are not part of the central bank digital currency. Okay, instead of having people mining all over the world and distributing the ledger, which is what makes Bitcoin something you can trust, something that's very interesting in a digital age. Instead of that, the central bank is a closed loop. So you have one computer designed most likely by IBM, potentially by another US company, but probably IBM. So that's kind of like the governmental linked entity. And it mines the whole blockchain for FedCoin in a closed system. So there's no distributed ledger for central bank digital currency. There doesn't need to be, because they'll monitor you and they'll decide, when you need to be reprimanded or whatever's going to happen. And so people need to understand that central bank digital currency is not Bitcoin. It's not going to be Ripple coin used as the Fed's dollar entity. Does this make sense?
It makes sense, but I want to go back to your point of dumping dollars. We've been hearing about de-dollarization since 1966. Why would it happen now? And
well,
do the
I
countries
don't think
the countries that are dumping the US dollars matter in this system?
Well, the countries that matter are the countries that produce things that we need. And those countries are irritated with the system as we have grown accustomed to it, because the U.S. has dictated all the rules of the world. They've put into place onerous financial regulation, reporting requirements. You have all these FATCA laws. You have all these Patriot Act laws. It basically, the U.S. is a monetary digital prison, and everybody's very happy with it. But the rest of the world says, why should we answer to you? Why should we not be able to sell a ton of sugarcane to anybody we want in any currency that we decide to use? And it's a really good question. And so I'm not one of these get rid of your dollars people. I don't think the dollar is going away or something. It's crazy to think that. But I think you need to look at, like, what are the central banks doing? They're saying, instead of holding all dollars as a reserve, we're going to hold a little bit more gold. We're going to spread the currency out. We're going to maybe trade gas in renminbi or something, yuan, whatever. We're going to start shaking things up with how we interact with the world. And that means the US dollar has to compete a little bit more. And if it has to compete, it has to get stronger. So that's what the last year has been an effort to pump the brakes on the unlimited printing. They got a little lazy. So they're trying to rip this thing back. And in the process, what they're doing is they're putting inordinate amounts of pressure on their domestic system.
So if you're not concerned about de-dollarization or the loss of strength of the US dollar or as a reserve currency, is there a real threat then? Or is it just, all right, some of these nations are dumping dollars and life goes on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a shift going on. So there's a shift that's going on, and we have to be aware of that shift as it happens. We have to be aware that the US is losing standing. It doesn't mean everybody thinks in this like black and white way. Like the crash, the boom or crash. It's crazy. It can lose standing for the rest of my life. I mean, it's a scenario where they're gonna have zones of influence. There's going to be some countries like El Salvador where the U.S. has de facto control of what they do. Then there's going to be other countries like India, for example, that's trying to not align underneath the U.S. or underneath the Chinese. They're trying to say, we will do business with all of these sovereign nations. Okay, we will have deals with all of these emerging pillars of strength in the world. And so as you're going through this, what do? Well, you've got to I like the gold trade at the moment, because I think the gold trade wakes up when people start realizing this. It's an easy way to benefit. And you got to remember, the global south produces all the commodities. We haven't had a commodity rally for like 12 years or something. It's been so long that there's no young people that work in the industry, and I'm not young anymore either, by the way. So what people need to realize is nobody's going to be there when that party starts, and so that is a way to play this. And I think you have to patiently play it. I don't think it's like everybody wants this dynamic outcome shifting on a dime. It doesn't really work that way.
You're right. And I guess to wrap this juggernaut of an interview, we spoke about a lot of threats in part one and in part two here. What is the one threat that, if there is one, that keeps E.B. Tucker up at night and that you're very concerned about?
Well, people that know me know that I don't worry about any of those big things. I worry about incredibly ridiculous small things, and I'm not even going to share them with you because they're just comical. But I think I'm going to pose something to you, that what if life right now is we look back and we say, summer of 2023 was really, the best. I mean, it kind of got worse. How did it get worse? Well, we had more financial control, more regulation, more IRS snooping, more restrictions, more laws, more troubles with the economy, more AI influencing our kids, more chips being put in people's. Okay, what would you do with that summer of 2023? If you look back and you say, you know what, I was able to travel around, my kids weren't digital zombies, I had a little money, people still took the money, like I could do all these things. What would you do with that time? I think that's the thing people need to realize. Instead of thinking that you're going to avoid one of the things that's coming, instead of thinking like that, why don't you think, what if I look back at the end of this decade and there's like crazy stuff going on, like freedom is like, zero. You're in a digital prison, basically. You can't even move without being monitored. What if I look back to 2023 and say, wow, I really didn't realize how good it was? What would we do with that time? That's what I hope people are learning when they're reading ebtucker.com. That's what I hope people learn when they watch this interview. And I think from our friendship, you and Matt know that. And I think people should just think about it. They should just spend a few minutes with the television off, without looking at their phone, thinking about it.
Well, on that note, I can't beat that at all, or top that, or add to that, because that's just absolute perfection. And that is really how I feel about most of the 90s, EB.
Yeah.
We just didn't know how good we had it.
We did not know how good we had it.
All right. EB Tucker, I hope to see you at the U.S. Open.
Definitely.
I'll see you there.
We will be there. Yeah.
Well, I hope to see you before then, but U.S. Open, we're both always there. Love talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and we'll talk soon.
And thank you. We hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. I always love talking with EB Tucker. So stay tuned to Daniela Camboni Show. We'll have more great content coming your way. And sign up at danielacamboni.com to stay on top of it all. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.
Opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the contributor and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Stansberry Research, its parent company, or affiliates.